air just a few hours before House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's wake-up call in Asia after that controversial touchdown in Taiwan that's earning praise from some Republicans. But the White House, less thrilled. The Chinese, super mad. We'll talk about why the speaker's there and why China is threatening, in their words, those who play with fire. Plus, happening right now, the Senate is finally voting on that bill that'll give health care to veterans exposed to toxic burn pits. What one Democrat is telling me about the fight to get this across the finish line and what Jon Stewart is doing now. And new reaction from a top Homeland Security aide tonight on that strike that brought down the leader of al-Qaeda that we told you about as breaking news on this show 24 hours ago. What we're now hearing about the details and the planning inside that mission. Plus, election lies on the ballot in some key primaries tonight with voters voting, not just a referendum on Donald Trump, but abortion access, too. We're live across the country and bringing you a closer look at so-called crypto candidates in tonight's original. And a new chapter in the saga between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard lighting up social media. Have you seen this? What new court documents show now about the evidence from their defamation trial later in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and while you are sleeping tonight, we think, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi will be getting to work. Because in the next few minutes, the sun's going to rise in Taipei, and she's got a busy day ahead of her, including meeting with Taiwan's president and maybe throwing ye old proverbial wrench into the U.S. relationship with China. Watch, you're going to see the speaker there. There she is, walking down the stairs, heading the tarmac to meet with a delegation from Taiwan. And in Taipei, look at some of these pictures. People celebrating her visit. Welcome to Taiwan, Speaker Pelosi. No U.S. official this high up on the food chain has visited Taiwan in 25 years. And there's a reason for that. This is a very delicate relationship here. Taiwan says it's independent. China thinks of it as like a state that it should control. Pelosi saying in an op-ed for the Washington Post, timed it to her landing, that now is exactly the time to visit. Because, as she says, the Chinese Communist Party is getting aggressive, and that, in her words, America stands with Taiwan, our democratic partner, as it defends itself and its freedom. Surprise, surprise, China doesn't see it that way, saying those who play with fire will perish by it. And by the way, they just decided to do some military exercises in the Taiwan Strait. And the White House, just in the last hour or so, responding to those threats. Here's John Kirby.
The United States will not seek and does not want a crisis. We are prepared to manage what Beijing chooses to do. At the same time, we will not engage in saber rattling.
Okay, so why does this matter right now to all of us here in the U.S.? Well, first, experts point out that China's leader, Xi Jinping, his stance on Taiwan isn't all that different from how Vladimir Putin sees Ukraine, and you know how that went. The other factor is President Biden, with so much of the U.S. economy tied to China. Think about all those supply chain issues. The president's trying to make things less tense. Just last week, the two leaders spoke for a couple of hours on the phone. I want to go to Dan DeLuce now. And Dan, we've talked about how Speaker Pelosi's visit has kind of scrambled the usual D.C. allegiances here. To wit, here's the top Senate Republican doing something we don't often see him do, and that is praise Nancy Pelosi. Watch.
I think it's important that the speaker did go to Taiwan. I don't think the Chinese get to tell members of Congress where they can go.
All right, Dan, so talk to us about the expectation here for Speaker Pelosi's day in Taiwan that's coming up in these overnight hours here in the U.S.
Well, this is a historic visit any way you cut it. I think this is going to be in her biography for sure, towards the top. She's going to get a warm welcome. You can already see signs of that. She's going to meet with the president of Taiwan, and I think we're going to hear more from Beijing. A lot of angry rhetoric already coming out of China, probably more aggressive military activities, exercises. We've already seen fighter jets from China in the Taiwan Strait. All of this is not unprecedented. They have been conducting these kinds of drills and exercises periodically. But obviously, this is a kind of tense moment, and they want to send a signal that they very much disapprove of this. It is fascinating to hear the Senate minority leader talking that way, the Republican leader in the Senate. There are members of the Democratic Party also who are very supportive of this. There's a pretty broad bipartisan consensus about being very tough with China. And there's an argument on one side for this that, yes, we should have Pelosi, we should have the speaker visit because we can't do what we did with Russia. We can't send any kind of mixed signals. We've got to be very clear with China to deter them from making any move on Taiwan. But of course, huge risks go with this. And I think we're going to hear about this from China for some time. This is not going to blow over.
Talk to me. You're sitting there. I think people will probably know this. You're sitting there in our Pentagon workspace, basically, our workspace at the Pentagon. You've covered the State Department before. Can you give us a sense, as you're talking with people, your sources, insiders, et cetera, of what the concern level is? Because it seems to me like the expectation is not necessarily that China is going to do something crazy dramatic while Nancy Pelosi is on the ground in Taipei, but it'll be once she departs, right? And what happens then? And what happens with these exercises, the potential for a miscalculation, et cetera?
That's right. There's not a feeling of sort of imminent danger at the moment here when you talk to people at the Pentagon. And there's also this feeling that, you know, we've sort of seen some of this before, these kind of Chinese military exercises where they push the envelope, they fly very near Taiwan, they sail their ships near Taiwan and so forth. So they expect more of that. But you're right. It's what happens in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 months. There's a big party Congress coming up in China. They're expected to renew the leadership of Xi there. But what happens after that? And there could be some economic pressure we could see. So I think it's still a question mark how China reacts in the end.
Dan DeLuce, thank you for staying on top of all of that. I'm sure we'll be talking again tomorrow. Appreciate it. We've also got some new details coming into us tonight about the strike that killed one of the men who organized the 9/11 attack, the mastermind. Remember, this is the guy who took over al-Qaeda from Osama bin Laden. The U.S. has wanted Ayman al-Zawahiri dead now for 2 decades. He is, as of recently, as of this weekend, as the president announced. He says justice has been delivered, showing us a never-before-seen picture from the White House from back on July 1st. Think about the timing, right? And by the way, that picture shows a box that is kind of a model of a safe house that al-Zawahiri was in. This happened, the strike, just this weekend. So think about all the planning that went into this. Officials say it's just a sliver. And here's the thing, right? Al-Zawahiri was apparently comfortable enough to be stepping out onto the balcony of his safe house, where officials say he was targeted, in a kind of wealthy neighborhood in Kabul, like a nice part of town, which raises all these questions moving forward about him living there at all, and how that was apparently okay with the Taliban, even in violation of the peace agreement they signed. I asked Deputy Homeland Security Advisor Joshua Geltzer about that. Watch. What is the U.S. going to do to hold the Taliban accountable here? And how concerned are you that Afghanistan could again become a safe haven for terrorists?
Look, we think actions speak even louder than words, and the biggest action we can take to show that accountability is the one we've already taken. This is a major setback for them on all those fronts, and we'll continue to make that clear.
I want to bring in our White House correspondent, Monica Alba, for more on this. Tell us what else we're hearing from the White House tonight, Mon.
Well, we just had the press briefing right now with the top NSC spokesman, John Kirby, Hallie, who echoed, of course, what the Homeland Security Advisor told you earlier this afternoon, which is the White House has made clear to the Taliban, we know what you did, we know who you harbored, we're staying very vigilant to the threat, and in addition, we know what steps you took to try to cover up some of the evidence of it. So this is something where absolutely the White House is following very closely. And in terms of violating this Doha agreement, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said this was certainly a gross violation. The White House didn't go as far as to say that exactly. They said they continue to communicate essentially with the Taliban about this and making very clear and very known their displeasure with all of this, but at the same time wanting to be very careful not to telegraph any punches that haven't been thrown or any policy decisions that haven't been made yet. So that is something, of course, that will be under discussion. The White House didn't want to get into any details, though, about whether there will be any kind of retaliation, either on the part of the Taliban in Afghanistan or from the U.S. when it comes to that peace agreement that was struck with the Taliban in terms of what this means for al-Zawahiri and this counterterrorism operation. The White House wanted to put the focus on that and again reiterate what they see as a major promise the president made, now kept.
There's also a bigger piece of the context here, and that is we're coming up on the date that is just about a year now since President Biden pulled U.S. troops out of Afghanistan. At the time, and I know you remember this, there was a lot of discussion about, well, what would U.S. counterterrorism capabilities be if we didn't have boots on the ground? The White House at the time had said, hey, over-the-horizon attacks can be effective. We can still carry out operations even without troops in the country. This feels like an example of that they're trying to point to here.
Certainly, and this was the first one they were quick to say in Afghanistan that has taken place in the last year since boots on the ground left, since U.S. troops were withdrawn after the president made that decision, ending America's longest war. But certainly today, John Kirby said it is the first of course, potentially more, that they're going to be keeping an eye out for that essentially there will be more terrorists who will be in Afghanistan. He acknowledged that, and that he hopes, and the White House hopes, and the president hopes, that over-the-horizon capability isn't just going to continue, but will be improved and strengthened going forward. So absolutely making that point. And you mentioned it, Hallie, we're now in the month of August. We're very close to that anniversary, and I'm told the White House is trying to figure out exactly how to mark the solemn 1 year since 13 U.S. service members were killed in Afghanistan during that chaotic and deadly exit we all remember near the Kabul airport. So that's something also the White House is trying to weigh here, how to do the remembrance with some solemnity while also touting the fact that this major al-Qaeda leader who was being hosted and harbored in Kabul is now dead because of what the president credits these months and years of intelligence. We're told that really the president was briefed many times on this. He ultimately gave the green light on July 25th. And then, of course, it was over the weekend when they saw the window and they took it and they took al-Zawahiri out. Hallie.
Monica Alba live for us on the North Lawn of the White House. Mon, thank you. As we talk about the Biden administration on a different front now, they're taking their first legal step to protect abortion access since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. Late this afternoon, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, you see him there, coming out and announcing that the Justice Department will sue Idaho over that state's near total abortion ban set to go into effect later this month. The AG saying, hey, that violates federal law.
Idaho's law would make it a criminal offense for doctors to provide the emergency medical treatment that federal law requires.
So here's the deal. Basically, in Idaho, you have hospitals that receive government funding, that get money from the government. They're required to help patients with life-threatening medical emergencies. It doesn't matter what that emergency is. Meaning if that treatment means an abortion, if that's what it is, then they have to provide that care. I want to bring in Julia Ainsley now. And Julia, talk to us about this abortion ban in Idaho, the bigger picture of this lawsuit, and the significance at this moment, because this is being, in some ways, praised by abortion rights advocates because the administration is taking its first step now since the overturning of Roe.
That's true. And it could be that we see more of these cases. In the case of Idaho, it was almost the easiest place to start because this law was so blanket, a near total ban on abortion, as you said, Hallie. It even made it so that in the case of ectopic pregnancies, which we know are not viable and often can cause harm to the mother if they aren't terminated, that someone who performed an ectopic pregnancy could be held criminally liable and punished up to 5 years in prison. That was the kind of thing this law was going to outlaw. So now what the AG is saying today is that violated the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, which means, as you said, anyone getting federal funds, in this case Medicare funds, has to be able to stabilize and treat a patient for the condition for which they come into a hospital. And if you can't do that, if you can't provide that treatment, you are in violation of that law. So really, he's taking a step back. This seems like something that they would have definitely gone after, when Roe was in place. But now with Roe lifted, it's going to have to be this kind of blatant aggravation, this kind of blatant just ignorance of a law like that, where you wouldn't even be treating a patient, in order to get DOJ's attention. That's where we're seeing them start. We'll see if they start to work their way down the ladder and go to laws that maybe wouldn't violate that quite as clearly.
So that was my question, right? It's like, what is the domino effect of this? We've talked a lot here on the show about how there are a number of states that have moved to restrict abortion access in this country, these so-called trigger laws that went into effect after Roe was overturned. You see them on screen here. How much, right, is the DOJ potentially going to target some of these bans here, Julia? Or is that still an open question? It kind of remains to be seen depending on how this Idaho thing goes.
Yeah, I think it's an open question, especially depending on the law in each state. What the opinion said that we got from the Supreme Court was basically that it shouldn't be up to the federal government to be in the business of determining viability of a fetus. But in this case, they're not even having to answer that question. They're going after the livelihood, the chances of a mother living and her health. And that's why DOJ is coming after this law. I will say there's a provision in the Idaho law that says if a mother's life is definitely at danger, they can intervene. But there seems to be a lot of gray area in this Idaho law over something like an ectopic pregnancy, and also in other laws. Where exactly is it clear the medical intervention is necessary? And if that's ambiguous to any healthcare provider to the point where they would pause before rendering treatment, that's the place DOJ wants to get involved. So we're seeing it happen here. I would imagine we'll start to see it in other trigger laws, but there could be some laws that have been put in place under Roe that they simply aren't going to touch at this point because they want to start first with the widest blanket bans that they can.
Well, can you talk a little bit about the reaction that we've seen to this just in the last couple hours from both anti-abortion activists as well as abortion rights advocates too?
Yes, I mean, we've definitely seen people who are against abortion access who are saying that this is the Biden DOJ trying to come out against what they saw as a victory at the Supreme Court. And so now we're seeing they will now be pushing back. This could gear them up. This could give them more momentum going into midterms. It's hard to see how abortion won't be an issue for both sides going into midterms. But of course, for the Biden administration, this could galvanize their side to say, look, not all is said and done and settled on this issue. You still want to elect a president who will put the full resources of the Justice Department behind going after states that are trying to take away these rights. So again, this is pushing the issue of abortion back in front of voters as they head into this crucial midterm.
Julia Ainsley live for us in Washington. Julia, thank you. From Washington out west now, because extreme weather in the middle part of the country and further to the coast are causing lots of problems, lots of worries for millions of people. Look at what's happening in Kentucky, where extreme heat is the new challenge for rescue crews who are trying to save people after that awful flooding killed nearly 40 people. It might feel like 100 degrees in parts of the state where people already don't have power. Think about that. You got no power, you got no AC. It's going to feel like 100. Your neighbors may have lost their houses. It's a nightmare scenario. Roads have been washed away in some spots, making the rescues even harder. Then you've got what's happening in California, where the biggest wildfire of the year there has killed 2 more people. Right now, it's getting even bigger and getting closer to the Oregon border. Our Gotti Schwartz is covering that fire for us tonight, but I want to start with George Solis and the rescue push in Kentucky here. 5 days, George. 5 days and it's not better. It's not easier for people there, people who are still stranded.
That's right, Hallie. It's almost unfair. So the people here in eastern Kentucky dodging that rain only to be contending with this heat. And like you mentioned, many of them without power. On top of that, they are also dealing with a looming death toll. They know that that number is going to go up. The governor said so himself. You also have people that are still displaced, and you have cell phone service that is spotty in some places. So you still have people trying to communicate with loved ones to find out if they're okay, if they're going to be home. And now, at this point of the day when the water has started to recede, you have people going into neighborhoods to see what's left of their communities, of their homes. In many cases, nothing. We have seen crews out there already beginning to survey the damaged homes that have been lifted off their foundation. They're also waiting to see what kind of help they're going to get from the federal government, especially when you consider at this point that they are just left with nothing. It's really just incredible. But one of the things that we want to highlight here is that when things are at their worst, that's usually when humanity is at its best. And we have seen examples of that time and time again in this community, from the organizations that have come into this community to help out, to just volunteers and people from within the state that have traveled to hand out food and water. We had an opportunity to talk to one gentleman who lost everything in the floods, but is still out there committed to helping his community. Take a listen.
And there's a few people up there that we know that ain't got no vehicle, no way to get nothing to eat. The older people, so we've been trying to take meals and food and stuff to them. And water. I lost everything I had. I had to swim out of my house. Yeah. And but you know what? We're going to make it. Yeah. I'm just glad to have my life. It took a brand new home from off the foundation. Yeah. I lost everything.
Hallie, we can only hope that we'll hear more of these stories. The governor today on the ground, again, surveying some of those areas, hopefully getting a better sense of how many people are still missing. We hope it's not many. Tonight, he has also called for the flags in the state to be flown at half-staff to remember all of those lives tragically lost. Hallie?
George Solis, thank you. Gotti Schwartz to you now, Gotti, where local police say it's now 4 people that have died in this McKinney fire, which is getting closer now to Oregon. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, Hallie, it has been a grim day for crews in the fire zone, going from house to house, unfortunately, trying to locate people that are unaccounted for. And so far, we know that 2 more people have been found dead at homes along State Route 96. Now, in the town of Klamath River on Sunday, 2 more people were found dead in their car in their driveway, presumably trying to escape those flames. Meanwhile, out on the lines, crews have been trying to take advantage of a little bit of a break that they had in the weather since yesterday to shore up containment lines, to build fire breaks. But this afternoon and tomorrow, we are expected to see even more erratic wind. We're expected to see higher temperatures and dry thunderstorms, those dry thunderstorms that bring that dangerous lightning, but very little precipitation. We know that the most explosive growth happened in the first 48 hours of this fire, ballooning to over 55,000 acres. In the last 13 hours, just in comparison, the fire has only grown by about another 1,000 acres or so. So, Hallie, it's definitely slowing down, but there is so much damage left behind. We understand more than 100 homes and buildings lost, and so far, 4 lives as well. Hallie?
Voters are voting. That's a sentence that, as somebody who covers politics, I like to say. Right? Voters are voting in 5 states today in some primaries that really matter, right? Arizona, Michigan, Missouri, Washington, and Kansas. And here's why these races, these key primaries, are so important. The results are set to give us a snapshot of whether former President Trump and his election fraud lies still have a grip on the Republican Party or not. Right? Look at these 3 Republican House members who voted to impeach former President Trump. Not many of them did. These 3 did. They're now running for re-election. They are all now facing some tough fights to try and keep their seats. That's just one of the many storylines we're following. So I want to bring in Vaughn Hilliard, who is live for us in Arizona. And this is another place that's a good example of the Republican establishment, Vaughn, versus the more the Trumpier wing. Where's your head? My friend, is your head cut off? What happened here? I'm going to have your cameraman slightly adjust unless it's my monitor. Thank you.
It's been a heck of a week, Hallie, okay? Here we go. We're here now. We're here.
It's been a heck of a week. Vaughn, it's been a heck of a week because there's a lot going on there. You've got the governor's race. You've got the senator's race. You have election deniers on the ballot who are saying 2020 didn't go the way it actually went, right? I mean, this is one, I know tomorrow morning this is probably going to be the lead storyline coming out of primary night where you are in Arizona.
Right. I mean, we've got the Secretary of State's race, another election denier, Mark Fincham. You got the Attorney General's race, Abe Hamadeh, another election denier here. I mean, you've got a lot of candidates here with Trump's endorsement. Each of them could pull off a win, but if they don't, I think we could also be talking tomorrow about how Donald Trump has lost his sway over Republican voters. Because here in Arizona, make no mistake about it, this isn't like Missouri, where Donald Trump was coming in the 11th hour and endorsing 2 of the Senate candidates. Everybody here in Arizona, if you're a Republican voter, you have seen the TV ads, you know exactly who he has endorsed for each of these races. And yet at the same time, polling, it's not run away for these Trump-backed Republican candidates, including Kari Lake. Ever since these last couple of weeks have gone by, you've seen Karen Taylor Robeson, who's backed by Governor Doug Ducey, as well as Mike Pence, start to incrementally chip away here. And their team believes that they're in this year. And that's also, I think, why you've heard Kari Lake propagate the idea that there are election fraud and irregularities right now in her primary. But yet she hasn't given any exact examples or evidence. I want to let you hear me asking her about that.
Please.
What fraud is there? This is serious.
You want to make this about you?
No, this is about Arizona voters and their faith in this election.
The last person on this planet Earth I would tell about what we discovered is you and MSDN.
So you know about a crime, and yet you're not reporting it to authorities.
And I'm not telling you about it.
Hallie, elections officials from Maricopa County, as well as the Arizona Secretary of State's office, tell me they have received no concerns or allegations from Lake or her campaign at this hour.
It is, I think, a fair line of questioning, Vaughn. I'm glad you're there doing it. Let me do a bit of a lightning round with you, my friend, and I know you can because there's a whole bunch of races that are important. Let me hit Missouri. What's the thing people need to know about the Missouri race and what we'll be looking for tomorrow morning?
Right. Eric Schmidt has been atop the recent polling here. He's the current attorney general. He is backed by the likes of Ted Cruz, but also now quasi-Donald Trump, who late last night threw his endorsement behind the 2 Erics, Eric Schmidt, but then the other one is Eric Greitens. And the big question was, could the former Missouri governor get a boost by this quasi-Donald Trump endorsement? Eric Greitens, he is under quite a bit of scrutiny. He has been accused by multiple individuals of sexual abuse, of domestic abuse, and yet at the same time is still a viable candidate for the U.S. Senate right now.
Okay, Kansas, because this is another one. We talked about the DOJ moves, the first legal moves by the Biden administration since the overturning of Roe. Now you have abortion on the ballot in Kansas for the first time since Roe. This is another big one folks are watching.
Right. Kansas is a traditionally red state, and this is the first time in which voters are going to be able to decide in Kansas whether they remove abortion rights from the state's constitution. How many folks show up? How many Democrats in the primary? How many folks actually get out there and take part in this ballot measure?
Vaughn Hilliard, forehead and all, I am so glad to see you. You are going to have a busy night ahead of you and a busy morning, and I look forward to all of your coverage, including tonight. Vaughn, thank you, right here on NBC News Now for a Meet the Press Election Night special. That's 9 o'clock Eastern, however you stream your favorite shows. Let's talk about what's happening over in the Senate, because they have started to vote on the PACT Act. If you're like, Hallie, stop speaking Washingtonese. What is the PACT Act? This is the thing about burn pits, right? It's the thing that Jon Stewart has been fired up about. It's the thing that veterans have been doing a sit-in basically outside the Capitol about, that would basically give health care, this bill, to veterans who have exposed to these toxic chemicals that they're serving overseas. We have some new video, and it's Jon Stewart and veterans lining up outside the Capitol, getting ready to go in. They are going to watch this vote go down. We can't show you inside the Senate gallery, like we're not allowed to put cameras up there, but that's where they're going to be to watch this thing. It's a big deal bill. It's one that has been stalled for a while. And I talked with somebody else who's been pushing for it, Montana Democratic Senator and chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, Jon Tester. And his message to all the people who have been fighting for this to get passed. Is it because in some ways the government's broken, as they say?
Well, maybe this is a sign the government actually works, because people spoke up and people listened. But I'm saying that, assuming this bill passes, it shouldn't have taken this long. There's really no good excuse for it.
It's not like the Senate has a lot of dilly-dallying they can do, because they want to also try to get on to another key item on their agenda, a big climate and health care and tax bill before they leave for recess, which is Senate speak for vacation in August. Scott Wong is joining us now to talk about all this. So, Scott, I'm trying to make this as not D.C. as possible, because this is not a D.C. story, right? There's a lot of ins and outs and drama that I think you and I cover in the day-to-day of our political jobs. But for the veterans who will be watching this vote tonight, this is a significant moment for them and their lives and their health.
Exactly, and this is why so many of them have come to the Capitol over these past 5 days, protesting the Republicans that have been holding up this bill. Right now, about 75 of them have moved in, as you've noted, into the Senate chamber. They've relinquished their cell phones, so I was texting with some of them earlier, but they're now in the Senate chamber. They want to be on hand for this historic vote, $280 billion over the next decade, Hallie, that will be used for their health care benefits as they deal with various ailments related, they believe, to these burn pits, to, open sewage at some of these bases in Afghanistan and Iraq. And the reason why I think, some of these Republicans have now caved is because of the pressure from not only Jon Stewart, but specifically from these veterans. Let's hear our own Ali Vitale caught up with Jon Stewart earlier and talked a little bit about why Republicans are finally moving off their intransigence.
I think they're fraying in terms of their ability to withstand this. I think this is cruel and unusual punishment that's going on, and they've got to end this.
And so this bill looks like it will cruise to passage later tonight, probably within the next hour and a half, 2 hours or so, Hallie. Right now they're going through a number of amendments, but under the deal that was reached with Chuck Schumer, none of those amendments, all Republican amendments, look like they will pass. And so the final bill looks like it's heading towards passage and will be at the president's desk perhaps by later this week.
There's also this other piece of legislation, this other bill that senators want to get done. And we had this interesting optical moment, right? Senator Joe Manchin, who helped work out this deal on climate and health care and taxes with Senator Schumer, whispering in the ear, leaning over, talking with, do you see her there in the middle of the screen? Kyrsten Sinema, who is the kind of holdout Democratic senator, or the question mark, we should say. Any update on where things are with this? Do we think it's going to move forward? Are you going to be there for the weekend? What's the deal?
A lot of good questions we don't have the answers to yet. We asked Senator Manchin as he came off the floor after having that private one-on-one conversation with Sinema, tell us all about it. He was very quiet. He's giving her some space to make her own decisions about specifics about that legislation. We asked specifically about the carried interest loophole that we have talked about that could be a source, a problem spot for Kyrsten Sinema. He would not engage with us about the tax reform portion. So a lot of questions still up in the air on this big reconciliation package, Hallie.
The NFL dropped its own big news, stripping the Miami Dolphins of 2 draft picks and some pretty big punishments for team owner Stephen Ross for what they're calling conduct that violated the integrity of the game. What is that conduct? Basically trying to get Tom Brady and former Saints head coach Sean Payton to come to the Dolphins while both were still under contract. They actually tried this twice with Brady, allegedly, when he was with the Patriots, and again when he was with the Bucs. It's part of an investigation stemming from allegations by Brian Flores, an ex-head coach, who's suing the team for racial discrimination. But the Dolphins are not getting punished for that here. They're getting punished for this other thing. Ron Allen has been following this for us. And Ron, these are some pretty big consequences still for Ross and for the team.
Yeah, we're talking about 2 things. We're talking about tampering and we're talking about tanking. First, the tampering part. It's a huge black eye for the Miami Dolphins and especially for their owner. Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, said that what they were doing was unprecedented, that it was in scope and in severity, and that this went on for a period of years, that they were trying to lure Tom Brady to the Dolphins. Remember, this is a time when Brady is talking about leaving New England, the Patriots, and finding another team, and that this went on for some time, and then there were some discussions with Sean Payton, who was a coach of the New Orleans Saints and one of the gurus of the game. So a lot going on there, and there's never been a case like this in the NFL. All the teams abide by the rules, don't contact another player when they're under contract, so that there's an even playing field, and so that everybody has a chance at these high-value free agents and other players. So the owner was fined $1.5 million. He's a billionaire many times over. Is that a big fine? Probably not. And another executive was fined $500,000. The Dolphins also lose 2 draft picks, which could be significant. One's a first-round draft pick, but they have another first-round draft pick from another team. So how serious is the penalty? It's unclear. In terms of the tanking part of it, the allegation was that the Dolphins were purposefully losing games and that Brian Flores, the coach, had been bribed or told that he would be paid $100,000 if he lost games, so that the Dolphins could improve their draft position. They would get a higher draft pick if they fall lower in the standings. The investigators said that what was said about all that was just in jest, essentially. It wasn't taken seriously, and that nobody acted on it. So that allegation essentially, the Dolphins were found not guilty of if this were a court. It wasn't a court, it was an independent investigator. But the bottom line is that Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins, comes out looking really poorly in this as a manipulator, is trying to do things that are just above, that are just beyond the rules of the game. He gets a big fine. The Dolphins suffer some consequences in terms of draft picks. But this does not deal with the whole bigger issue of discrimination that Brian Flores raised some months ago.
Ron Allen live for us on this story with a lot of ins and outs. Thank you very much, Ron. Good to see you. When we come back, we are on the ground in Michigan, where the Republican candidate who got Donald Trump's late endorsement in the gubernatorial primary is walking a tightrope between the MAGA faithful and the so-called establishment. We'll be right back. In Michigan, all eyes are on the Republican race to take on Governor Gretchen Whitmer, because that is one that has been absolutely bananas. Okay, you got 2 candidates who were disqualified for fake signatures on their petitions. And then another candidate, Ryan Kelly, was arrested for misdemeanor charges for his role in the January 6th attack. But the coveted endorsement from former President Trump went to former conservative commentator Tudor Dixon just last week. as a new report from the Brennan Center out today is warning of widespread misinformation in this year's midterms. I want to bring in Shaq Brewster. And Shaq, there's a lot of controversy on this, right? Because Dixon is leading in the polls, but other Michigan candidates backed by Donald Trump actually tried to block the endorsement. They're like, oh, she's too establishment, et cetera. Talk to us about this and the stakes here.
Yeah, the name that you hear a lot when they're launching those attacks against Tudor Dixon is the DeVos family. The fact that the DeVos family, through their super PAC, has put up lots of ads, spending more than $1 million putting up ads in favor of Tudor Dixon. And that's why you have one of her top opponents, Kevin Rinke, saying that she's the establishment candidate, dismissing the endorsement of former President Trump, an endorsement that he sought for himself, and saying that President Trump had wrong information and was given bad information by his advisors. So the impact of Trump's endorsement on the results tonight, that is an open question. And when you talk to voters about the impact of the endorsement, it depends on who you're talking to, because just listen to a sample of what they're saying based on what they've been hearing.
Anybody he endorses is too radical for me.
You say that as a Republican?
I say that as a Republican.
Why did his endorsement carry so much weight for you?
Because we were in a good situation when he was in office, and now we're in a really bad situation.
Hallie, I also spoke to some Democratic voters who picked up a Republican ballot because they said the former president has weighed into the local races here. They said anyone that he nominates is too extreme, and they don't want to be, they don't want the potential of that candidate to be on the ballot in November, Hallie.
Before I let you go, Shaq, talk about this new report from the Brennan Center that spotlights these lies that continue from the 2020 election, that the election was stolen. It was not. We know that some of the candidates for governor in Michigan they're on the Republican side, including Tudor Dixon, have talked about these claims as well. She then went on Fox News and dodged questions about this whole thing.
Yeah, and that kind of sets up why this race is so important, because it's not just the lies and disinformation that have come out, but it's also laws that have been passed by the Republican legislature in the state of Michigan that have been vetoed by the Democratic governor here. If a Republican goes on to defeat Gretchen Whitmer in November, those laws would be signed. There would be restrictions on things like early voting, things like absentee balloting. And that's also why you're hearing warnings from the Secretary of State's office tonight saying that it may be a long night of vote counting. She said to beware of that misinformation, because in the state of Michigan, election workers cannot start processing those absentee ballots until polls open, and they can't count them until polls close tonight. And when you have more than 1 million voters who have requested an absentee ballot application, there's a concern that it may take some time, and she doesn't want what she calls misinformation to fill that void as we wait for those vote totals to be calculated, especially, Hallie, if these races are close when we start getting those numbers in tonight.
Shaq Brewster, mainlining coffee, I am sure, and caffeine to be able to stay up till the results come in. Shaq, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
It's an IV.
I believe it. It's not just Michigan, right, but Missouri and Arizona, where it is a big night, not just for candidates, but crypto donations, which are becoming more popular. The subject of our original tonight, in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. Super PACs linked to some of the crypto industry's biggest names are spending millions of dollars in different primary races, with the big unanswered question, what's the government's plan to regulate this?
Eric Finman, the self-described youngest Bitcoin millionaire, started buying Bitcoins around the age of 12. Now, at 23, he's taking some of the millions he's made and investing it in political campaigns.
The cryptocurrency industry wants to back people that are supportive of crypto and not anti-crypto. And I think that's as simple as that.
Finman's behind a new D.C.-based nonprofit called America's Future, which will finance what he's calling a midterms tour, a series of rallies across the country supporting conservative candidates.
$10 million is going to be going to events, and $10 million we're giving away to PACs, committees, and candidates. And then a part of that will be Save Arizona PAC.
That PAC is backing Arizona Republican Senate candidate Blake Masters, who has questioned the legitimate results of the 2020 election. He won former President Trump's endorsement. The Saving Arizona PAC has raised more than $16 million this election cycle, according to Open Secrets. Crypto in politics is not new. The Federal Election Commission voted to allow Bitcoin contributions back in 2014. And since the start of the 2020 election cycle, the crypto industry has poured more than $30 million into campaigns. Adav Nodi is the vice president and legal director of the Campaign Legal Center, which is working to change the campaign finance system and protect voting rights. he's skeptical.
Well, right now, it's really a wild west. The situation with cryptocurrencies coming into campaigns and the political system is awfully close to completely unregulated. It's a terrible idea to have 50 different rules for cryptocurrency in politics. There's a reason that most of these rules are set at the federal level, and that's because we want uniform rules for elections to Congress and the Senate and the presidency.
In California, for example, the rules changed about a week ago. Soon, candidates there will be able to accept crypto donations if they immediately convert that currency into U.S. dollars. But whether it's crypto or dollars, the debate around money in politics isn't stopping.
There's a deep problem in the financing of our campaigns right now in terms of that disproportionate voice that the wealthy have at the expense of voters and average citizens in all fields, including cryptocurrency, as we're seeing right now in real time. Very, very wealthy people are able to pour massive amounts of money into the system and potentially buy results and buy candidates with it.
Finman is one of those people pouring money into campaigns, and he calls it a paradox. He doesn't like how much of a factor money can be, but since it is one, he's going to keep contributing.
It's unfortunate. And then so, I feel like in an altruistic way, I want to put money in to compete with this kind of corruption, in my opinion. And that's what it takes to deal your hand in.
As for the federal level, Washington is still trying to figure out how to deal with the crypto industry overall, not just in politics. After the crypto crash in May, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen called on Congress to pass what she described as comprehensive regulations with a focus on stablecoins. Well, Congress is apparently working on a bill. They're not there yet. Coming up, Alex Jones apologizing in court today. The Sandy Hook families sue him for defamation. We've got that next. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day. And because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Southeast Bureau, people who live in Georgia can now claim embryos as dependents on their 2022 state taxes. The state's revenue department says taxpayers who have an, in their words, unborn child with a, in their words, detectable heartbeat can get $3,000. From our West Coast Bureau, an 80-year-old liquor store owner stopping would-be armed robbers in Southern California. Look at this. Surveillance video shows somebody getting into the store with a weapon and ordering the owner to put his hands up. So the owner then fires off a shotgun at the suspect, who's being treated in a hospital. He'll be booked into jail for robbery and conspiracy. From our Northeast Bureau, a man in Connecticut capturing the moment he came home to see a bear, in his house. Just like meandering through the hallway. That's weird. He says he came in through the front door, had to shoo it out, came back the next day. So state officials have set up a trap to humanely relocate the bear. In court today, far-right conspiracy theorist Alex Jones is apologizing to a Connecticut family for calling the Sandy Hook school shooting a hoax. It was obviously not a hoax. It killed 20 kids and 6 educators. Listen to what Jones said not too long ago.
That I never intentionally tried to hurt you. I never even said your name until this case came to court. I didn't even really know who you were until a couple years ago when all this started up.
Jones has already been found liable in this case. Today's trial in Texas is to figure out how much he should pay for defaming Neil Heslin and Scarlett Lewis, whose 6-year-old son, Jesse, was among the victims in the shooting. They want $150 million. Let's bring in legal analyst Danny Savalas. And Danny, I think it's important to note, Jones repeatedly said this lie, right? He said this over and over again. He has portrayed this lawsuit against him as an attack on his First Amendment rights. But now he's apologizing. Legally, does that help him?
This case, as we see it, is only about damages. It's no longer about whether or not Jones is liable. So the question arises, what benefit is there to Jones taking the stand? Well, I suspect, and we may never know, that a personality like Jones as a client believes that throughout his many years in the public eye, through his voice and wit alone, at least in his mind, he's been able to persuade people. So this may be a case where even though his lawyers probably advised him to keep it very tame, that he might have gotten out ahead of his skis and probably didn't do himself any good by trying to explain what he did on the stand. in a sense, this really isn't about whether he did what he's accused of. It's about really how remorseful he is. It's in a way, it's like a sentencing hearing that we're watching in real time.
You know, what I think is important to center here is the family, right? This particular family who, in testimony, tried to illustrate just how awful this has been as they've been attacked by people who believed the lies that Jones kept saying. Watch.
It just, I can't even describe the last 9.5 years of the living hell that I and others have had to endure because of the negligence and the recklessness of Alex Jones and his propaganda that he has peddled for his own profits and success.
I have to think that testimony also plays a part in a case like this.
Of course. I mean, this is really a question. Sometimes in the law, in trials, it's really at this point a question of how bad is the jury going to hit Alex Jones, at least in using my predictive abilities, which I don't think take a lot of predictive abilities to decide that Alex Jones is going to get hit pretty hard by this jury. This is nothing but a sympathetic plaintiff situation and a defendant who probably isn't going to acquit himself or didn't acquit himself very well on the stand.
Danny Savalos, thank you for your legal perspective on all of this. We're going to be keeping an eye as that case obviously comes to a close. Appreciate it. Still to come, the hashtag Amber Heard deserves an apology has been trending online. Have you seen it? Why? Because of apparently newly unsealed court documents in the defamation case Johnny Depp brought against her. What we're learning from them coming up. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Johnny Depp and Amber Heard fans going at each other. It's happening again now because of what appear to be new court documents just made public. Thousands of pages of this stuff making revelations, including that Heard's team said Depp tried to introduce nude photos of Heard into evidence in their defamation trial. That's according to the Daily Beast. The news got the hashtag Amber Heard deserves an apology trending on Twitter for a bit, with one person saying people need to start believing victims when they speak up, in their view. Another writing that Heard deserves an apology for everyone rallying around her abuser. Depp fans pushing back on that. NBC News has not independently reviewed the documents, but has seen copies online. Attorneys for Depp and Heard declined to comment. You'll remember it was just back in June that a jury awarded Depp $10 million in damages in his defamation suit. Heard's countersuit was $2 million in damages. This is Callan Rosenblatt, who you see on your screen joining us now. What else do we know about these documents, Callan?
So, Hallie, I just want to reemphasize that we have not seen the original documents ourselves. Right. This is going off other people's reporting. But what the documents appear to show is that Johnny Depp or Amber Heard's team alleges that Johnny Depp's attorneys tried to submit audio recordings that were modified. The metadata shows large gaps in those audio recordings. It shows text messages between him and Marilyn Manson discussing the case. As well as you mentioned, it shows that his team attempted to possibly submit nude photographs of Amber Heard into evidence. We believe that all of this was rejected, that it did not make it into the final court case. But, you know, it appeared that the fan-led fundraiser for this kind of backfired on the Johnny Depp fans who wanted to find more dirt on Amber Heard. That was the original intent, was to sort of drudge up some more toxic information on Amber Heard. And so now we're seeing, you know, this apology hashtag trending as some people start to reassess their position based on these documents reported in the Daily Beast.
Let me ask you to put on your, like, extremely online person hat, right, as somebody who gets the internet and who's online all the time, because this is what we've seen, even just this little bit of sort of defense of Amber Heard, and you've laid out, I think, what we do and don't know about these documents well and what we do have at NBC and what we don't have. But just as you look at the way that the sort of attitude has been around Amber Heard just recently online, it is different, right? I mean, I remember watching, you know, Steve Patterson for days here on this show talk about how there was so much support for Johnny Depp online. Amber Heard's fans were like barely a presence. It feels like a little bit of a shift.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, a lot of Amber Heard fans that I spoke with, or they're not even fans. I really want to be careful with that. They're people who just believed her story. You know, They were really nervous about speaking out because there was this really ferocious support of Johnny Depp. And so to see a hashtag trend that is supporting Amber Heard is such a massive shift. You know, we talked about on this show and on other shows how Johnny Depp appeared to, you know, win in the court of public opinion. We're starting to see some people, you know, go back on that and say, maybe we were wrong. You know, maybe we jumped the shark, or we jumped the gun too quickly. So we saw lots of hashtags trending during the case, lots of Amber Heard, you know, is a liar and things of that nature. So to see a hashtag in favor of her is really quite remarkable, considering how much vitriol there was towards her during the actual trial itself.
Callan Rosenblatt, good to see you as always. Thank you very much for that breakdown. And thanks to all of you for joining us as always here on the show. We're going to have a lot more for you here tomorrow, same time, same place. I'll see you then. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.